Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm going to be giving my on second thought about Goodfellas. Now, this is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen it yet, you should go watch it, come back, and we'll talk about it then. So, Goodfellas. In case you don't know, Goodfellas is based off of the book Wiseguys, and it is essentially a mob movie, an Italian mob movie, gangster movie, and that's pretty much the whole plot. It follows around the character of Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta. It also has Robert De Niro in it and Joe Pesci, and it is a quintessential gangster Italian mob movie. Now you might be wondering, so what's the exact plot of this movie? And it does follow Henry Hill's life. It's based off of a true story, but there's not a concrete plot necessarily. It's kind of just the overarching story of this guy's life, and that's a good thing. It's a great thing. You know what it honestly reminds me of is an older Tarantino movie where stuff kind of just happens and it's really moving along because of the characters and the dialogue. The dialogue in this movie is the best part of the movie in my opinion. I was sucked into this movie because of the characters and because of the dialogue. I'm not a big gangster mob movie type guy. I don't generally care for those kind of movies, but this one really works for me because the characters are so much fun and it's so interesting because of all the banter going on. Yes, there is a plot, there's conspiracies, people go to jail, people have to be taken into protection agencies, people are getting killed. There's a lot of that gangster stuff happening. But the dialogue is just so good. Obviously, with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci, you're expecting a lot of good dialogue, and it doesn't let you down at all. Ray Liotta, who I'm not normally a big fan of, is even awesome in this movie. It's a really good movie, and I talked about in my last video, The King of Comedy, how that was my favorite Scorsese film up until that point. Yeah, this is better than it. And I'm not saying that as any slight to any of his previous movies. This is just his best movie, in my opinion, so far. It was awesome. And a big part of it is the dialogue. It's so quick, it's so snappy, it's so interesting. And like I keep bringing up, I'm not into this kind of movie normally, but I love this movie. That's how good it was. It was so quick, it was so intelligent, it was so smart, it was so well done that I liked it a lot. There are a couple of negatives, only a couple that come to mind right away. As always, the editing with Thelma Schoonmaker isn't my favorite thing. There's a couple of weird things in it. It's not that bad, but there's a couple of things in it. And then also the pacing of this movie is a little drawn out. I feel like it's a little bit slow at times. It goes on a little bit longer than it needed to, but not a lot, honestly, and I could see why somebody would definitely disagree with me on that. They'd say, no, it doesn't, it was perfectly paced, and I would just say it's a matter of opinion in that point. I'm not saying that's a definitively bad thing about it, but for me, that is how I felt about it personally, but it's not like something everybody's gonna be like, why is this movie not ending yet? It's like, it's not that bad at all. And those are the only two complaints that come to mind. Like I said, Ray Liotta is not an actor I will flock to see a movie for just because, oh, Ray Liotta's in it. I'll go see it. I don't think anybody thinks that way, honestly, especially not anymore. Back then, maybe. But no, normally I wouldn't watch a movie just because he's in it. But he was good in this movie. And De Niro was good. He wasn't the main character as he had been in the past for Scorsese, Liotta was, but he did well in his smaller role. And then Joe Pesci steals the show completely. And I think everybody knows that with the whole scene where he goes, funny, funny how? Am I a clown? Do I amuse you? That whole thing. People love that scene, and it is a great scene. I enjoy that scene a lot. And then also his death scene is iconic. I think that the movie could have done a little bit better to mask that coming, but also at the same time, I knew well about his death scene well before having seen the movie. So that could be it too. It's hard to completely detach yourself. I think this is really where we saw Scorsese become the Scorsese we know of now. He started getting into a lot of these gangster movies. He started getting into much quicker, snappier kind of movies. Not that his old movies are bad for their slow, drawn-out pace. I love a lot of things about Taxi Driver. I didn't actually mention it in the Taxi Driver review, but it's got great cinematography in this one scene especially that comes to mind, where he's on the phone call and then the camera moves away before he's off the phone call. You don't see stuff like that as much now in the modern Scorsese movies, which is a shame. I like that old version of Scorsese. Maybe that was his cinematographer more than him, though. But in the newer Scorsese films, they all have a much snappier attitude to them. They're much more to the point, even when in movies like this or in Wolf of Wall Street, it is a meandering plot. It's still getting to each one of those bulletin points in that meandering plot quickly and effectively. And that's where I bring up, yet again, the biggest trope of Scorsese is this plot. He uses this plot a lot, where it's kind of a warning story of don't take what you have for granted, or don't bite off more than you can chew, or something like that, where it's like in Wolf of Wall Street, it's the same plot as Wolf of Wall Street, essentially. Now, this came out first, but he did this also in Raging Bull, where it's like, it's a warning story. He loves to do these bad characters that get their comeuppance in the end to a certain extent, where it's like, you could have walked away, you could have been smarter with what you were given, you could have just enjoyed what you had instead of searching for more, and you would have been fine. And he does this story a lot. And I like that story. I don't love that story. It depends on how you tell it. In certain movies, it works better than others. I guess this is just the sentimentalist in me, but I prefer movies that they learn their lesson before the movie's over. But that's a nitpick as well. I'm not taking that out on this movie, taking it away from its rating at all. He does like this storyline a lot and does it in a lot of his movies. So if you as a viewer pick up on that, it can get predictable, it can get repetitive when you're watching all of his movies through. That being said, this is a good version of that story, and all of them generally are, and all of them are based on true stories too. So it's like, it's not even like you can say, oh, he keeps writing the same story, because they are true stories, but he keeps looking for that story to tell. That's interesting. I don't know, at the end of the day, I'd probably give this movie an 8.5 or a 9. Probably need to think about it a little bit more. Like I said, it's not my kind of movie, but it still made me really like and appreciate it. So that's, good for it. Good for Scorsese. He was able to do that. That's impressive. I don't generally like chick flicks, but there's the occasional chick flick that's actually good. And you're like, oh, look at that. I enjoyed that. And that's impressive when you can do that. And that's the same way it is with me in gangster movies. Another one that comes to mind is Scarface. That one was done so well. I love that movie. And it's just about a guy, same sort of thing. He's power hungry. He's just obsessed with that lifestyle of sex, drugs, rock and roll, and guns. And he just can't stop. And then he gets his comeuppance in the end. I think, like I said, the best thing you can compare this to is like an older Tarantino film, like Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction, where it's like, the plot is definitely there. There's definitely a plot. There's definitely an outline to the events that are happening. But you're not really worried about it because it is meandering. It is a bit loose of a plot. It's kind of just about the characters reacting to situations. And I don't mean that as a slight against this movie at all. It's a style of filmmaking, and it's done very well in this. But this movie definitely is about the characters and what they have to say, and you're just waiting for the next a little snappy bit of dialogue, the next situation to get into, the next cool thing that you can see, even if some of it is silly. And when you think about it for a second, like the opening shot where they've got the guy in the trunk, they want to have the scene shock you into thinking that they're surprised that there's a guy in their trunk, when in reality they're just surprised that he's actually alive because they beat him up so bad already and they thought they killed him and then he's not. They open the trunk and he's still alive, so then they stab him a bunch to actually kill him, and then they start shooting him, and he's in the back of their car. They're just shooting the back of their car, and it's like, that's silly, but you enjoy watching it, a lot like Tarantino movies, where you're like, nobody actually, I think, thinks that the fighting or the action scenes in Tarantino movies make any sense at all. They're completely illogical, but man, they're fun to watch. I don't want to say this movie is nearly as far as a Tarantino movie goes, but little things like that are like that, where it's like, why would you be shooting up the back of your car just to kill a guy who's probably already dead? Because it was funny, because it was entertaining, because it looked cool, and that's why they do it. And there's moments of that in this movie where it is a little bit silly, it is a little bit overblown, but it fits the narrative of this movie. It's enjoyable to watch, and ultimately that's what this movie is about. It's showing you the dark side of this part of the world, the gangster part of the world, the mobster part of the world. It's showing you firsthand what it's like in that world, where it's all about how macho can you be? It's all about out of check egos, honestly, where you see Joe Pesci's character kills a guy just for the stupidest reason, and you see Joe Pesci's character become that warning symbol to everybody around him. Don't be like this guy. Yet all of them in their own way become like that guy anyway. So yeah, it's an enjoyable movie. It is very relatable to anybody, where you can see a character making dumb mistakes despite plenty of warning. So I enjoy this movie a lot. Like I said, 8.5 or a 9. It's a very good movie. If you haven't seen it yet, you definitely should. It's a classic and definitely worth a watch. So that's what I had to think about it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments and we'll talk about it there. So thanks. Bye.